For those of you who are local, you probably have heard of us because of our activities in the economic development plan that we put out for part of the land over the NASA Plum site. We've been advocating for about the last year and a half the development of a research park out there. As most of you probably know, it's about 2,500 acres, and the employment rate there is falling like mad. They're down to about 220 employees in NASA Plum. The Inspector General's report, for those of you who have seen it on NASA's website, says that there's no mission or reason for the continued operation of NASA Plum Rock. That's the NASA IG speak. So unfortunately, given that NASA can no longer get a man off the ground, if we want to go to the International Space Station, which we paid for, we have to hitch a ride with the Russians. So since we can't fly somebody, I think I understand what's going on with NASA Plum Rock. We argue that it's an extremely valuable resource. NASA Plum Rock was put together by the Eisenhower administration to originally help the Air Force with their nuclear-powered aircraft program. It's a wealth of resources and technical skills that can be used to grow the region. So that was my initial entree into economic development out here. I'm continuing to work on that. It's a real important issue for me personally. So on the energy side and the economic development piece, that's why I ended up here. I think a lot of you know that there's other political stuff around involved, but that's not the topic for today. As far as the lake is concerned, although yes, I'm from the Cleveland side, it did take me a little over an hour driving here. My house is, I think, 0.95 miles from the waterfront. So personally, I go down to the lake a whole lot. I really enjoy it. One of my daughters is over here helping. She'll tell you that, you know, when she was a little bit smaller, we used to go down to Edgewater Park, and when the waves were up, I love picking her up and I throw her into the waves, and we do that for hours and hours on end. She misses those days, I do too. She's a freshman in high school, getting ready to actually leave the country for a year. She's applied for a foreign exchange program. She's cutting out. She's going to spend either a year in South America or a year in Europe next. So again, for me, the economic development of this region is very important, and the health of the lake is very important. My family and I live very close to the lake, and we enjoy this a lot. There's a lot of things going on with the lake, though, environmentally. And I don't want to pretend that I'm an expert on each and every individual piece of it, though I'm doing everything I can to get up to speed on as quickly as possible. So we've got a number of speakers here today that are going to address what's going on with the lake, some of the causes and the problems with it. We're going to propose some solutions. And as I walked around, I was taking notes on some of the things that are interesting to people. There's the short term and the long term. One of the things that got thrown out at me that I hadn't thought about talking today, and I'm not sure it's going to be addressed either, was what happens with the water as the states out west get thirstier and thirstier. Right? There's all this talk that California and Nevada want the water from the Great Lakes. I think that there's some enormous technical challenges to that, and I believe it's covered under some of the treaties we've got the Canadians, so I'm going to be doing some research on that and try to see what really happens from management piece. There's the invasive species issue. That got brought up as I was walking up. The zebra mussels and the Asian carp are two huge threats to the lake. The one that's the nearest and most immediate in my mind, of course, is what happened last summer with the huge algae blooms. On the western side, Toledo, I mean, we all saw it was a national news item. And given what's happening up in Flint these days, not an algae bloom, but water quality for people is really in the news today. Given that it's 23 degrees outside, at the moment the algae don't stand a chance. But in 6 or 7 weeks, the ice is going to be gone, the temperatures are going to rise. Is it going to continue to bloom along the lake? How far east is it going to get? Is it going to hit the water for my family as we're drinking? And never mind what happens if it starts to move north to our friends on the Canadian side. We have the potential for an international incident. So these are just some of the things in my mind. We're not going to solve everything today, but I really hope that we're getting the creative juices going, because this is going to take action at the local level, the state level, and unfortunately the federal level, because of course the lake touches a variety of states and a foreign country. It's not like we're talking about, you know, the Mason Reservoir north of Columbus, where, you know, totally surrounded by one political locale, there's one set of regulators, one set of political authorities to make the decision. That's not the case with Lake Erie. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our first speaker and bring up Hugh Wheeler, the mayor of Port Clinton. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours. Feel free to use the microphone and the podium if you want, but I seem to be allergic to them.
I'm with you. You know, I'm here to tell you how important the lake is to Port Clinton. You know, if we didn't have the lake, Port Clinton would be a cornfield or a bean field, or, you know, we'd be a township or a village. We sure as heck wouldn't be a city, because people wouldn't have moved here. You know, at Green Lake, you know, we rely on the lake for our water, drinking water. If the algorithm ever comes down here, which it has, and if it ever gets bad, we got to look at ulterior motives. We got to have another source of water, another intake for water, which we have two intakes. One's in Portage River, one's in the lake. Like Toledo, you know, Toledo's got one intake that they use, and it's in the lake. When it gets covered up with algae, they have nowhere to go. We kind of have a little bit of backup because we got the intake in the river. Not that we want to drink the water from the river. But, you know, we got a state-of-the-art plant, state-of-the-art sewage system. So the health of the lake, the invasive system, the invasive species, the zebra mussels, you know, everybody always says if there's a lot of zebra mussels, the lake's clean. That's not always true. As we've seen, they didn't do anything with the algae. If we didn't have the Green Lake, you know, our economy around here would be pretty much desolate. We wouldn't have it. We rely on the lake for the tourists to come in the summer. Brings economic money to us. They spend their money here. They fill our hotels. So, you know, we have to kind of look forward, and I know this process is already in place, as the runoffs to the lake. So, you know, everybody blames the farmers putting manure on the fields in the wintertime. It all runs off the ice into the lake. That's all in place. You know, now there's grants for them to put their manure in buildings with storage tanks underneath to store that, to separate it, and then it gets pumped out. I really, you know, as you all know, I'm new at this process. We need a clean lake. We need to make steps to make it cleaner. Without it, we're not much of anything. What else?
Okay. All right.
Okay. I would second what the mayor just said around the economic component. That this is not just a pure environmental issue. As I walked around this morning, I had some discussions with people about the environmental angle and the difference between an environmentalist here and environmentalists on the West Coast. That an environmentalist in Ohio, if you take them out to California, they're viewed as a right-wing fascist. They're not pure enough for the environmental movement on the West Coast. I spent a few weeks out there this summer, actually in Sacramento, meeting with a number of organizations. And the environmental movement on the West Coast believes the research should be used for no purpose whatsoever. Absolutely not. I can go into those details when we hit lunch or something there. In my meetings with some of the environmental groups down in Columbus, they'll say they're all for people having warm houses and a nice standard of living, but we've got to control CO2 emissions because they're concerned about what happened with the climate. They're focused on an objective as opposed to believing that people are the fundamental root of all problems. So the lake, as an economic source for the city, tourism, filling your hotels, filling your restaurants, coming here and buying products is vitally important. The lives of the citizens here. So I just wanted to, I guess in a very long-winded way, second what you said. I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Mark. Mark Coeppler. If you would come up to you have a PowerPoint presentation or you speaking?
No.
Okay, whether you want to podium, you want to stand out in front of me too loud like me. Sorry. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I'm honored to be able to be here and participate in this forum, and thanks to Don Larson for putting this on. As he stated, my name is Mark Coeppler, and I just want to apologize for those of you that were expecting to see the former mayor, Deb Tester, here. She couldn't make it. She had some business commitments that she had to honor this morning, and so she asked if I would speak in her place. I agreed. You're stuck with me. I'm a former Portland City Councilman, and I'm currently running as a candidate for Ottawa County Commissioner. I'm not going to talk about the, the causes of the harmful algae blooms or the microsystems. There's people better qualified than me that can talk to that concern. But what I would like to talk about is the impact and the effect that clean water and Lake Erie has on the area. So, first off, I always like to make sure everyone knows I'm not a native of Fort Clinton. I've only lived here 56 years. We moved here in 1959, right before my 5th birthday, so I'm not a native of Fort Clinton. But the odd thing is, Lake Erie and tourism is what brought our family to Fort Clinton. After World War II, my dad got a job working for the Burroughs Corporation. And for those of you that don't know, Burroughs, they manufactured typewriters, adding machines, bookkeeping machines. Those that might be a little bit younger here, that relates to keyboards with a word processing program, calculators, and a computer with financial software program. But those they were mechanical machines, and a couple of the places out here have them. Coeppler Island Club had one, they had a bookkeeping machine, the Marblehead Bank had a bookkeeping machine. So, and when they would have problems, my dad would, the company would send him up here with this equipment. Well, he noticed in the summertime, the influx of people into this area. Tourism really isn't new. I mean, this was back in the early 50s. And all the little trailer parks with their marinas, those were the first, probably second homes for a lot of people on vacation. And he just noticed that there was a tremendous amount of people up here in the summertime. And he thought, this would be a pretty good place to open up an ice cream stand. So, just west of here, where Sand Road 163 meet, he convinced my grandpa and grandma and my mom that they should build an ice cream stand. And in 1958, they opened up the dairy aisle. A lot of people probably remember the dairy aisle over here. And they commuted back and forth. And in 1959, they decided to buy a home in Fort Clinton and move here. And so in August of 1959, we moved to Fort Clinton. So it was tourism driven by Lake Erie that actually brought us to Fort Clinton. So they bought a house on the corner of 2nd and Hayes, so we were 1 block away from the beach and 1 block away from Lake Erie. And I tell you, as a kid, what a great place to grow up. Well, Jerry, you were right over there thinking about it. I mean, it is a great place to grow up. The beach and the lake were 1 block away. And I guess that's where my love for Lake Erie really started, because that's where we were in the summertime. And in the early 60s, we had the huge mayfly invasions, which the mayflies have always been a sign of a clean lake. And we had these huge mayfly invasions, and I remember them quite well because even though I was too young to work at the dairy aisle, they would coat the walls at night, and then in the morning, my parents would have to go out and clean up the dead mayflies. That was my job. Not a very desirable job. But then somewhere around the mid-60s, things started to change. The mayflies disappeared as the lake became more and more polluted. You didn't see the mayflies anymore. And the lake just kept getting worse, it kept getting worse. Publications started writing stories about it. We started to become the joke of the nation, comedians on late night talk shows would make jokes about it. 1969, Cuyahoga River Plot. I can always remember one statement, something about, we won't need to build a bridge to Canada, we'll just be able to walk across Lake Erie. So it was becoming a real problem. We were like the laughing stock of the nation. Believe it or not, even Dr. Seuss got in on the act in a book, in one of his books called The Lorax. He wrote the following.
Corporation, for those of you who are local, you probably have heard of us because of our activities in the economic development plan that we put out for part of the land over the National Plum site. We've been advocating for about the last year and a half the development of a research park out there. As most of you probably know, it's about 2,500 acres, and the employment rate there is falling like that. They're down to about 220 employees in NASA Plum. The Inspector General's report, for those of you who have seen it on NASA's website, says that there's no mission or reason for the continued operation of NASA Plum Rock. That's the NASA IG speed. So unfortunately, given that NASA can no longer get a man off the ground, if we want to go to the International Space Station, which we paid for, we have to hitch a ride with the Russians. So since we can't fly somebody, I think I understand what's going on with NASA Plum Rock. We argue that it's an extremely valuable resource. NASA Plum Brook was put together by the Eisenhower administration to originally help the Air Force with their...
That's the actual word for it. The lake was really in a bad way. So, in 1972, they finally took some action. The Clean Water Act of 1972 was signed into effect by President Richard Nixon, and that legislation cracked down on phosphates and laundry detergent. That was found to be one of the big contributors to the problem of feeding the algae. Municipalities had to crack down. I can't say stop, but they had to crack down on their dumping of raw sewage into the waterways. Industry, they probably made a fairly good start there at having them stop polluting the waterways, rivers, and the lake did start to clean up a little bit. And I kind of wanted to help too because I feel very passionate about the lake. This is where I grew up. I love the lake. And in 1973, I enrolled at BTS Firelands in their environmental technology course. And if you're familiar with it at all, basically it was about water treatment, wastewater treatment, water quality. We would sample the lakes and rivers and things like that. As life does sometimes, I got led into a different direction, but I've still always been concerned about the quality of the water in Lake Erie. So, the reason water quality is so important, I've been fortunate enough to live here. I've worked at a couple of arenas. I've worked for construction companies that have built second homes and condominiums along the lake shore. I even worked for a short period of time for the Middle Boat. And now, as owner of my own business as an HVAC and electrical contractor, a lot of our work still centers around the lake and around the arenas and businesses that basically are dependent on the tourist industry. And the lakes, it's not just me. The lake is vital to so many people in this whole area. And we need that clean water. We need a clean lake. If you can imagine, Maumee Bay State Park, they've had some really serious problems. At the park, it's a great vacation spot, but the vacationers are told not to go in the water. And when they had the problem with the microsystems in Toledo, they couldn't even drink the water. So, when families are planning vacations, that's got to weigh on your mind if you're out there and you couldn't use them all. I look at our different communities, Danbury, Port Clinton, Genoa, building new schools in hopes of attracting families, young families who can go out of the area. But if we don't have a clean lake, if we don't have that access to clean water, that's kind of a deterrent for families to come into the area. See, it's always kind of been my belief that the abundant fresh water that we have available to us in Lake Erie and in all of the lakes. The Great Lakes make up 21% of the world's fresh water supply. And we've got a source of it right out front. It's always been my belief that this abundance of fresh water, there's a ability to use fresh water, eventually it's going to lead people back into the city. You know, the whole Rust Belt area took a huge hit. Water quality could have paid, played a part in that, but eventually people will come back in the city. Because we have the fresh water. Down alluded to the fact that, out west they kind of eyeball our water a little bit, but we have, and people, businesses, jobs, maybe even some of the manufacturing jobs will come back into this area because we do have fresh water. And, it's something that's not going to probably happen right away. It may not happen in our lifetime, but they will come back. We can't let the problems that are arising now from the blue-green algae and from the local system outbreaks and that, we can't let that set us back again. We just can't. On December 11th of last year, I was fortunate enough to attend the Lake Erie Improvement Association's meeting that was held at Town Island. And I found out there that, there's some very knowledgeable people that are already working on the cause. Those people are much more qualified to talk about it, the cause, and what we can do to try to correct this. But the one thing that does bother me is we have a lot of people that are working on the cause and what we can do. We also need to work on procedures and protocols and actions that have to be taken if treatment plants are threatened by legal ways with the high levels of nitrogen. Right now, it appears that most plant operators in the area, they use their best judgment as to what to do. I can remember an instructor once telling me, they can use the swag method. If you're not familiar, that's a scientific wild ass guess. There are no guidelines to how to treat this and how to effectively treat this. And they need our help also. They need help to finally take care of this problem if it arises again. So what I'd like to say is, we cannot forget the lessons of the past, and we surely don't want to go back to the 60s and let the image of the north coast of Ohio be damaged once again. We need fresh water, we need to have fresh water available, and we need to act on that now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. The one comment I threw off that was right near the end there about the lessons of the past. There's a very famous line about those who forget history are condemned to repeat it. So, thank you for bringing that forward. A little point on the agenda. We've got one more speaker before we feed you. So, Kerry, as you think about this, you're the last one between them and eating. And then after food, Sandy Binns, our final speaker from the Lake Erie Improvement Association. And then we're going to do a Q&A with all the people who are speaking here today. So, hold your questions there, and then you get a chance to ask everyone. So, Kerry Jackson is with the Center for Water Restoration. Drove up from Cincinnati to come see everybody today. So, how was the storm in Cincinnati? Did you manage to avoid the snow
I was lucky.
apocalypse?
Yeah, I live north, so I didn't get it too bad. It was only a few inches. But I have children that can shovel that. So
Yes.
good work, man.
Put the younger generation to work. Thank you.
How do I use this thing?
John.
There's a forward and a back. Okay, as you notice, I'm taking a lot of these challenges. I'm Kerry Jackson. We have a company called Center for Water Restoration. And what our company does is we clean wastewater. All right, we work with municipalities, we work with, water reclamation facilities, we work with industries, and what we do is we get down to the root cause of the problem. I'm not going to stand up here and bore you with what's caused the problem, okay? It's there, it's been building for, the last 25, 30 years. But what I'm going to tell you though is, as you're looking at it, I think everybody's trying to take the right steps. We want to stop the lake from getting worse, we want to remove it, we want to restore it to health. The one thing I will tell you though is everybody thinks that the people that are doing oversight committees and looking at it are the experts in charge. My friend back here, Bill Shamp, he lives in Salina, right?
Salina.
Salina, I never pronounced that correctly. Okay, he lives in Salina, and I actually met him 2 years ago trying to help Brain Lake St. Mary's. All right, if you guys are familiar with him, I mean, that is, you guys want to talk about devastation to the tourism business and that in the area, Bill can tell you stories about that. I mean, how many businesses have closed, homes that are for sale. I mean, it's a wreck out there. Well, one of the things that their improvement association, for the wisdom that they had of the experts in charge, they said, let's put alum in the lake because it'll settle to the bottom. It'll keep the bad things from rising. Theory's not bad, right? It's like putting saran wrap over something that's bad so everything else is good, okay? But you're putting it in a body of water that's constantly moving. That actually caused more problems than it did any good. Now, this was a combination of Corps of Engineers, water treatment scientists, of university people that got together to say, how do we kill algae? All right? So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not saying everybody's bad, because they're not. There's a lot of really good, smart people out there. I am not one of them. I have scientists that work for me that are much, much smarter than I am. And they were smart enough that I couldn't get them up here today because they're still working. Even though you guys had free food. And I told them free food. That's why I'm here. So what I want to talk about, though, WaterOxyChem, let's not even get through this. This is all stuff you guys know. All right, here's what we do. When you get down to the root of the cause, why does algae grow? Anyone? Why does algae grow? Come on. Question answer. Anyone?
No oxygen.
Pardon?
No.
No light? Okay, no light, no oxygen. Absolutely correct. All right? Pardon me?
Food source.
Nutrients, because they have a food source. That is correct. Okay? What happens in the lakes when all the bad stuff, and everybody wants to point fingers at either the farmers, they want to point fingers at the sewer districts, or they want to point fingers at the industry. I got to tell you, we can point all those fingers, but this is the reality. You don't have dissolved oxygen in your water. All right? Most people don't realize this, but you have to have a stable level of dissolved oxygen under the surface of water. So when you get pollution that comes in, so for example, when your dishwasher drains into the lake, that dishwasher is adding what's called CODs. That's chemical on demand. That takes oxygen out of water. Okay, when you run food through your garbage disposal and it goes down into the waterways, okay, that's called BOD, biological on demand. That takes oxygen out of the water. All right, and you've got to replenish it somehow. The US EPA, and this is one of the things I challenge all of you to look at. Don, we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but the US EPA has billions of dollars in fines for industry, for municipalities that have been out there for years that have never been enforced. Okay, and they don't enforce it. I don't know why. I mean, we have a US EPA, and people are more scared of your sewer district than they are of the US EPA. All right? The Ohio DNR is supposed to enforce the US EPA, and they don't. Okay? And that's just way, I'm just giving you the facts. I'm not taking a side one way or another. I'm just giving you the facts. What our product does is our product generates stable dissolved oxygen under the surface of water. How many people have ever had a cut and put hydrogen peroxide on it to clean it? How many? You know how it turns white and bubbles? That's oxygen. You're creating dissolved oxygen at that point. And how long does that last? 30 seconds to a minute, maybe? Okay, well that's the best that's on the market right now. If you talk to people about how would you add dissolved oxygen, they'll say mechanically. Okay, you can do that by using these giant aerating fans. They use these little tubes under the water called bubblers that just literally pump bubbles into the water. They'll run it through a waterfall series. And if you look at surface water, on the top, where the blue and the green lines are, oh, I can do this, cool. Up here, what happens is oxygen slowly comes from the atmosphere down. Okay, but it comes down about the top 12 to 14 inches of water, depending on your weight. All right? After that, the dissolved oxygen that's down here comes from fresh water moving in. Lake Erie is huge. There's a lot of rivers that go into Lake Erie. You know, there's actually tide movements within Lake Erie as well. But what happens down here is as all your sediment starts to come down and rest, no matter what it is, whether it's phosphates, whether it's CODs, whether it's BODs, even the amount of dead fish, here we go, even the amount of dead fish that collect down here, all of that starts giving off and using up dissolved oxygen. When that dissolved oxygen is used up, algae grows. Algae cannot grow in what's called aerobic environment. All right? No matter what, every scientist will tell you that. Any chemist or biologist will tell you algae cannot grow in an aerobic environment. Okay? All of our lakes, whether it's Grand Lake St. Mary's, whether it's East Fork Lake, whether it's Lake Erie, all of them that's growing algae are growing algae because they're deficient of dissolved oxygen. Okay? People say, like at Grand Lake St. Mary's, for example, they've got some really nice sized fish, right? If you want to go fishing and actually eat the fish from there, which EPA tells you you can eat it, I'm not going to, but if you got nice sized fish, right? I mean, 14, 15 pound crappie supposedly, okay? Those are the fish that stand near the top of the water that's getting the oxygen up here. Okay, those that die, because they said, well, we don't see dead fish floating. Dead fish only float for a little bit, then they fall to the bottom and become part of the system here, all right? If you take, and let's say every one of these arrows here, forget the names that are associated with them, but let's say every one of those arrows are a tributary. So a river or a stream or drainage ditch that's coming into the lake. If these are properly oxygenated with the dissolved oxygen, as they're coming into the river, then they're going to create the aerobic environment down here where algae cannot grow. Okay? It's a simple issue, and it's a simple solution. Now, Lake Erie is huge, right? I mean, Grand Lake St. Mary's is a little over 1.5 trillion gallons of water. Lake Erie, you multiply that by 1 million, you got Lake Erie. So how do we get that? How do we make that happen? How do you cut that off? Okay? Right now, EPA standards require that if you're a sewer district or if you are an industry, like a power plant or something along those lines, that you're required to put between 2 and 4 parts per million dissolved oxygen as you release your water into the riverways or into the lake. Okay? So something that's easy for me to understand. If you're a power plant, you're taking water in, you're running it through your heat exchangers to get rid of the heat, and you're dumping it back into the river. Okay? Well, they require you to spool it so that the dissolved oxygen level gets to a certain part, and you got to clarify and do a few other things to make sure there's no bad stuff. And then you release it into the water. Okay? If you look around the lake, if everybody's releasing 2 parts per million, your lake's never going to survive. And it just won't. In any natural body of water, where you have, if you check the parts per million up here, when the lake is healthy, like right now if you went out and checked it and then checked it when it starts hitting May, June, and July, you'll see that you're between 6 and 10 parts per million dissolved oxygen. Okay, so releasing at 2 parts per million is not going to help. Sewer districts claim they have to release the raw sewage into the waterway when big rains come and they get flooding. Again, I'm not here to stand here to say they should or shouldn't do that. What I'm standing here to say is, okay, if normally you're releasing 2 parts per million, let's say you're at the top. Normally you're releasing 2 parts per million and you go through 1 million gallons a day. A big rain comes, you release 4 million gallons of raw sewage. Why even have the 2 parts per million? Because that's never going to help. Okay? Most industries, and this is a sad fact of our industry too, I was working with a power plant on the Little Miami River in Ohio, and they have to reverse osmosis the water they use in their heat exchangers because Little Miami is so polluted. So they have to literally purify the water just to run it through a heat exchanger like a radiator and then put it back in the river. All right? It's a fact, it's what they have to do. I'm sorry they have to do that, but that's where we are. But as I was telling them, so if they're releasing it here, and again, you're only releasing it 2 parts per million, you're not going to save your lake. Okay? Right now, with an algae blossom that can be seen from space, anybody seen those? Anybody Googled that? You Googled that? Okay. I was telling Don earlier, last year, we were talking with whatever the Farm Bureau name is for Canada, and I can't remember the name of it. But we were up in Lake Michigan, and we were talking to some of them about it, and they were bringing up the algae blossom from space. They were bringing up how amazing it is that we don't have more. They think we should have more in all of our lakes. If you look at the reclamation side of the house, and how many of you guys recycle? Right? I mean, you got plastic, right? You got some bottles, maybe. You got aluminum cans, right? Up in Canada, it's paid for. By the way, do you pay for your recycling? Right? You have to pay for Rumpke or whoever to take it. Yeah. Cannot believe that, but okay. In Canada, they don't do that. All right, they have compost that you put your food in, instead of a garbage disposal, you put it in a compost bag and they take it. They have cartons, I mean, newspaper, everything's segregated in 7 different recycles that they do in their trash. So less than 10% of their actual consumed waste goes into a landfill. Well, at the same token, they do the same thing with their factories. I mean, they still have paper mills on the edge of Lake Michigan that is putting 12 to 14 parts per million of dissolved oxygen back into the lake. A paper mill. Most of them shut down in the States because of the pollution they generate. Okay? Any questions on that? Any questions on the pollution? You guys just looking at the food? I'm with you on that one. You know, I left Cincinnati
I've
for
been
this
asked by the
morning.
kitchen actually that you run a little long due to an oven issue, so we don't serve people cold food.
Don't get me wrong, I can
You
talk
can do
forever.
that.
Yeah, I can talk forever. I don't have to talk about that.
What do you suggest to throw in then? You're talking about it, it's supposed to be 2. What do you suggest?
Well, one of the things, we work with US EPA Testing and Evaluation Center all the time. The Testing and Evaluation Center actually wants to raise the level to 6.0 parts per million. Mechanical means is very, very difficult to do that. It's very costly. Right now, and I'm going to use the city of Hamilton Sewer District that I know very well. They have 3 10 million or 5 million gallon tanks outside after the water's been treated. Okay, 3 of those big circular tanks that are doing the different things, but they're also trying to raise the level of oxygen. They can barely get it to 2.0 with 3. If they wanted to get it to 6, they're going to have to add at least 6 more because they have to keep going more and more and more because of the bubblers will not do it. Okay, and that's the testing that we do with US EPA. Where our product is 50 parts per million, that means 50 gallons of WaterOxyChem for every million gallons of wastewater. And that alone raises it to 6 parts per million. If your water is pretty pure, then it'll get up to 12. If your water has a bunch of COD or BODs, then it's not going to get past 4 or 5. All right, because it's a chemical reaction that takes place. So what we've been working with them on, especially down around the bottom, when we did it, we were asked to look at Grand Lake St. Mary's. We went up and looked at it. And what we were talking about doing was sparging. Sparging is a way to take a single hose, and at the end of the hose, branch it out into many. We're going to sparge at 50 parts per million WaterOxyChem at the bottom of the lake, right? Because if you've got oxygen, if you're releasing your oxygen here, it's going to raise. Okay, and as it's raised, it's being consumed. The great thing about algae, even though you got blossoms out there right now, okay, they're there, they're kind of dormant. If the oxygen level is at the level that they like, then when it heats up, they're going to start feeding. They're going to feed on that lack of oxygen. If oxygen levels are higher, what happens is algae starts to decay. When algae decays, it releases oxygen. So I will tell you right now, will WaterOxyChem fix Lake Erie? No. Could I apply it to get it to the level that it should be? Absolutely. But it would take a number, equal to the national debt to do it. And I'm all for you guys spending it on my company. I don't appreciate that. So I understand that. Kerry's good with that. But what should happen is we should feed through the tributaries because we've got to give a catalyst to the lake. Okay? In the 60s, and I agree with everything you said, I thank you so much for bringing that up so I didn't have to. But in the 60s, when they stopped the pollution and they went to these companies and said, you've got to filter this. Okay, you can't be just dumping chlorine into the lake. Because used to, including sewer districts, as the waste came through, they'd add chlorine to disinfect it and then dump it into the lake. Chlorine takes away oxygen. And that's why it does so well. Okay? But when they stopped doing that, there wasn't as much pollution in the lake and the lake was able to come back. Okay? You've got a catalyst right now. Think of it as, I can't even think of a good analogy with it, but you stop, even if today, if you stopped all the pollution from going into Lake Erie, it would take 20 to 25 years for those algae blossoms to go away. Okay? People are going to argue with me on that, and I'm fine with that. I've not done the scientific method to understand if that's really what it is. My chemists tell me that, and I go with my chemist. That's why you have to jumpstart the lake. But the question is, how do you do that? You can't just shut that off. I mean, we've been working with hog farms, and we're working with dairy farms down in Oklahoma. And our product adds to their dairy lagoons, reduces their sludge by 80%, which then makes the water to be able to be irrigated on the field with the nitrogen in it, and nitrification already taking form. Is there some of the phosphates and phosphorus that come out? Yes, but not near as much. Most of it's in that sludge. All right, and they don't have to thrash the manure out on the fields. So that's one way to do it. We have to turn back to the sewer system. We have to say you must raise that level of dissolved oxygen. Even if you don't want to use WaterOxyChem, I'm fine with that. All right, but you got to raise the level to 6 parts per million. The EPA has not passed that law yet because there's not a good mechanical means that can get it to 6 parts per million. So even if we come back and we tell them, and even if the EPA said we want you to get to 6 parts per million, you know, if you think your sewer bill's high now, it's going to jump staggeringly if the EPA would say that right now. So there's a financial means on why they've not said that. Any other questions? Thank you. That was a good question. Anything else? I can continue to just talk.
Okay, Larry, you had a question from the...
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
Are you doing work at Grand Lakes in Erie right now?
No, I quit doing work with Kerry Jackson.
Why?
I'm not dealing with the mill building.
Who's that?
He's the guy in charge of the improvement association.
You want me to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Politics. Because the guy that's running the lake restoration for the lake is more interested in a paycheck than fixing the problem.
But you've got a lot of lakes around Ohio. Buckeye Lake comes to mind. Your River comes to mind. That have major alcohols right now. Are you working anywhere in Ohio that we might know about?
East Fork Lake, I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's something about the Little Miami River.
Yeah.
You got the Little Miami River, we've done tests in that. We've done tests with 3 or 4 of the sewer districts to show them, you know, how our product works better than the others. All right. Who's familiar with H2S gas? Anybody?
What?
H2S gas? Hydrogen sulfide gas? No, you are? Okay. What happens is, let me go back, I can use the button. In pipes, in your sewer pipes, when this decay down here and the sludge builds up in your sewer pipes, you know, if you go buy a manhole cover that smells bad, okay, what that smell is actually dissolved sulfides. Okay, those dissolved sulfides, what happens is all of this gets here, there's no oxygen, so it starts to decay. When it starts to decay, bacteria grows. Well, in the sewer system, algae usually doesn't grow. Bacteria does. All right? So when that bacteria grows, it creates what's called dissolved sulfides. Dissolved sulfides connect when the new water comes through, like after a rain or something. The dissolved sulfide connects to that called H2S gas, hydrogen sulfide gas. H2S gas is lethal. Every one of your sewer systems that you're at, if it's over 4 parts per million, you have to evacuate the facility. We were at the city of Hamilton, and they were reaching close to 15 and 20 parts per million in times because of the dissolved sulfides that were in their pipes. Our product cleaned all of it. At 50 parts per million, it cleaned all of it. Not because we're a wonderful cure-all, not because we're the next thing instead of bleach, but because all we do is add dissolved oxygen. So we're putting dissolved oxygen in the water. Good question?
Yeah, what do you think that later should be designated stressed?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you repeat the question, please?
She asked if we thought Lake Erie should be designated as a stress lake.
Which would strengthen preventive measures.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt. If you got, again, the first time I've been to your little town, I love it. I think it's cute. I just love all of this. I grew up in Texas. We didn't have water. We gather around your wells and have a good time. So, you know, that's my background is you know, going to the cement pond as it's on Beverly Hills. And that's what I knew of water. So I love the little towns along the lake. And when I went to visit Grand Lake St. Mary's, it's a beautiful little community, but it's a dying community. You know, people have had homes on this lake for years and years that they've passed down to children that now you can't use. I mean, you can go to the home, but you can't, you know, you don't want to get in the lake. We can still boat on the lake, right? So you can still boat on the lake, but you don't want to get in the water. East Fork Lake, when we were testing out there were signs, big signs on the lake that said, please do not ingest the water. And kids were out there playing, you know, water in their mouth, spitting it at each other. I'm like, guys, you know, that's disgusting. And they were all, you know, doing, oh, it feels weird. Yeah, it feels weird, but it's all over you. Get out of that lake. So absolutely. Anything at this point? Yes, sir.
Is your product expensive? Why isn't it just becoming an automatic use?
We are currently, no, my product is not expensive. First of all, to answer your question. Secondly is, again, even at 50 parts per million, a Grand Lake St. Mary's, they wanted to douse it, if we could have doused it for 1 year, the whole thing, doused the whole lake. That was about $8 million to do that. Now, they've spent $20 million the past 2 years and done nothing. In fact, they made the problem worse. And all the businesses were like, yeah, it'll fix the lake and get tourism back. They're losing millions of dollars a month in tourism. So as our product, there's a cost. To fix this, there's going to be a big cost. We have tried to work with the government officials to work with the farms and to work with the sewer districts to apply our product at the source. So once it starts there, if you're looking at a sewer, again, think of this as a river, okay? And these are the rivers coming into the lake. And if this river's coming in at 6 parts per million, 6 parts per million, 6 parts per million, then pretty soon your lake's going to get healthy. What you're going to see, since you've seen those satellite images and you see along the edge how it's darker, then how it gets out, it gets a little bit lighter as it gets out, those images will start getting reversed. They'll start looking lighter along the edge of the lakes where those tributaries come in, and then as you look out into the lake, it'll get lighter then lighter again. Because that's the way the lake works. That's the way oxygen continues to move. And I hate, by the way, when I say this, please don't say Kerry wants everybody to get into a bad storm. But the best thing for that lake are the bad storms that happen. Because that moves that water, that moves that oxygen. You get the big waves that are moving over. But again, that just helps it up here. Okay? Out in the middle of the lake, it doesn't help it down here. Lake Michigan was full of PCBs. And, all those companies that were along the lakes from Chicago and Milwaukee were fined. And they actually had to go out and clean them out. They had to get divers that did the drums that weren't opened out of the bottom of the lake, and they had to clean up all that lake. What they did without knowing it as they were doing this, is they were pumping dissolved oxygen into that lake, and they didn't know it. All right, they had those big cranes that were going down, lifting, going down, and that whole water was being circulated up and down, up and down. And that actually brought back the smelt fishing for Chicago, which had went away for years. They had been smelt fishing there since the 50s. And then in the late 90s and early 2000s, it all came back. All right? Again, a byproduct of the correct dissolved oxygen being put in the lake. But they spent $3 billion to clean up that lake. And again, it was a side effect, right? Just the big cranes and everything. As water comes up, it creates the suction for water coming down. So it was just a side effect. But again, whether you're using, one of the things they tried at Grand Lake St. Mary's, they're still dredging, right? Okay, so one of the theories was, let's dredge and get the nutrients off the bottom of the lake, then the algae won't grow. Algae's still growing though, isn't it? And it's still growing because there's no dissolved oxygen. All right, and I know you guys are saying, Kerry, this sounds too simple. It's not simple, and it's not easy. But, reality is whether you want to say, yes, sir. Time to eat?
No. Next question.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Is the increase in dissolved oxygen in the lake, say Lake Erie, would that have any negative impact on the positive biology that's happening out there?
It would do nothing but accelerate it. Dissolved oxygen, when you move anything, even algae, okay, even protoplankton, I can't pronounce that correctly, but even algae, when you turn it, and phosphorus, when you put it into an aerobic environment, it creates positive. Okay, most bacteria, people will tell you bacteria is bad. Bacteria is not bad. It's the environment that bacteria goes into. If you got bacteria in an anaerobic environment, meaning void of oxygen, then it's going to eat and excrete horrible stuff. If you got bacteria in an aerobic environment, which is rich in oxygen, it's still going to eat, but now it's going to excrete positive, if that makes sense. Yes?
Minnesota, which is a big farming state, has just passed a mandatory buffer. So for its businesses and farms.
Correct.
Is that something that Ohio is doing?
I don't know. I will tell you that most of the farms that I've seen in Ohio, pardon me? Yeah, she said that Minnesota's passed mandatory buffer for their farms. The state of Minnesota has, and should we be doing that here? I won't judge one way or another on that. What I will tell you is that I see that have proper irrigation, it's proper irrigation, okay? It's the farms that are spreading manure on snow or, you know, those types of things. Also in drainage ditches, hyacinths. Anybody heard of a hyacinth? Anybody horticulture? Hyacinths? Okay. Hyacinths eat phosphorus. They love it. They grow like crazy, and that's why when you go to the swamp, you see them everywhere, because that's why the swamp water, even though it's green, it's considered very pure, because there's no phosphorus in it, because those plants eat it. We've been very successful planting those in the ditches, and it's just a seed. It germinates quickly. Now, it dies in the wintertime, so you have to plant it each year. But it eats the phosphorus before it ever gets into the riverways. What Minnesota did, though, is they took a step back and they've made the ditches bigger even than they are now. Those buffer zones they're talking about, they're actually pooling some of those, and they're making some of the riverways almost like a wetland. And they're charging it all back to the people that are contributing into that wetland. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying that's what they do. But they said, we're going to fix the lakes. I mean, even though they're a huge farming state, they're also a very huge tourist state when it comes to fishing and wildlife. And that's going away. You know, people would rather go to Canada than go to Minnesota. Although if you talk to them, they all sound the same.
A product that we're accustomed to, we're going to bring it down to a smaller scale that we can understand. It's like with we have a thing called a laundry pro that attaches to washing machines, okay? And it just oxygenates the water. And therefore we don't have to use laundry soap, we don't use bleaches, we don't use, and then when our washing machines drain, then all that oxygenated water would go into the sewers and then out. So it's more or less your company on a much larger scale, moving oxygen into the water, correct? Is that?
Yes and no. Yes, and the water and all that goes through, and our product does that. As soon as your oxygen bubble stops in the washing machine, the oxygen goes away. Okay, bubblers, think of it this way, as that bubble comes up through the water and it pops at the top, right? If all the oxygen came out of the water at the bottom, there wouldn't be anything to pop. So there'd be no, slowly the bubble gets smaller, and it dissipates and goes to the top of the water. So what happens though, the bubble comes up, it agitates the water, and because it's in your washing machine and it's putting oxygen, it's moving other things, it's doing a lot of good. Okay, same with sewer companies. Sewer companies have the same theory that your washing machine has, and they're putting all this bubble in all their walls, the sewage that comes out before they release it to the lake. But all of our studies have shown as soon as you turn that bubbler off, the dissolved oxygen goes away. Okay, same theory though. I just want to make sure we understood that just because you put a bubble in water doesn't mean the oxygen goes away.
Right.
Yeah,
But it also then stops from using the laundry soaps and everything that has phosphorus.
I'm all for that.
Every
I love
little bit
that.
helps.
Absolutely. No, I'm all for that. I wish everybody had that. Absolutely. At Grand Lake St. Mary's, they were giving really good deals on called gators, which are irrigators. Yeah, irrigators. And the thing were called gators. They put them in the coastals, and all around where you had your boat slip, and they were going like, man, this is great. It's adding oxygen. It's agitating the water, which any agitation of the water is good. Okay? But if you're, again, even if you've got 3 feet of water, which Grand Lake St. Mary's average depth is 3 feet. Okay, that agitation's only doing up here. Okay, it's not affecting this down here at all. And this is where we've got to get it from there down to here. This is where the oxygen has to be put. Otherwise, your algae is going to continue to grow. And they still have algae growing. Okay, good question though, and I agree with that. I wish everybody had those. I didn't even know that was that widely used.
It's just coming up.
Is it? Because man, I know GE when I used to be a vice president of General Electric. I was in healthcare. We heard about those and we wanted to use them. They're all throughout Europe.
Right.
Yes. And again, we're a slow country to adapt to that. Because we're capitalists. That costs money, so it's easier, I know, so I'll use it. Talking to the sewer system. We were talking to the ones, again, I used the city of Hamilton, we did a large study with them. But 2 years ago, they had just spent $7 million putting in their bubbler system. And now working we had the US EPA with us. It wasn't just Kerry and his staff. It was the US EPA and us. And we said we should study this because we're going to be better than your bubblers and we can get it to the level we want. We spent $7 million 2 years ago. We haven't got the cost payback yet, so never mind. Okay. I mean, I can't say yes or no. I just make sure I don't take anything out of Little Miami River. Yes, ma'am.
Have you bumped heads with a lot of these landscapers and Scott's Fertilizer Company as far as all the chemicals they use on lawns all over?
I do not bump heads with them. One of the things that was very, very positive that they did in Grand Lake St. Mary's was they went through and they told everybody, buy the fertilizer that had only a 1 in the phosphorus number, which I thought was great. And fertilizer companies make all that. Have I had a fertilizer, have I had vertical fertilizer show up at one of my sessions and, rave at me? Yes, I have. And I'm not pointing fingers. They're there. The question is, how do you fix it now?
Well, the only reason I ask, I know Scott's gives a lot of money to certain congressmen and legislators, political donations. So I'm just, when you say politics is involved, it has a lot to do with who's donating to which politician and what the company is that's donating and what product they sell.
I will tell you this.
Look where Scott's is located.
What?
Look where Scott's is located.
I
Columbus.
rest my case.
Yeah. I can answer that by telling you this. China loves our product and they buy more than I ever sell here. But they use it in the waterways. In fact, they want to buy a patent from us. And I'll tell you, if they ever come through the contract and makes sense, I'll sell them. Because they understand the Canadian Farm Bureau, whatever it's called, I think it's called the Farm Bureau, agriculture or something. But they're right now, they have a bunch of our product testing up there. They want to test it alongside in their hog farms and in their dairy farms. We've had universities do it. The one thing about I'll finish. Are we done? Are we ready? Is the oven good? Okay, I'll end with this. The one thing I will tell you is my understanding is that to look at the Lake Erie, the big picture of it, that the Ohio State University is kind of involved with it, right? And I love the Ohio State University. So first thing I'll tell you is I love all of them. But whenever you get a university involved with something, you have to remember a university's money comes from grants to study. All right? It wasn't Ohio State. Wright State University had that place at Grand Lake St. Mary's. And again, I'm not dissing any of them. But normally, if it's not created there, it's not the right solution.
I'll diss them.
Well, you can.
I love Ohio State, but anytime you get a university involved, all that it's going to do is slow the process down, not speed it up.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think Kerry goes by, so we're talking to him. I'm told food is ready, so please grab some food. Sandy will be our last speaker after we eat, and then you get to do the Q&A to everybody. So thank you. Please help yourself here. So we've got Kerry, who you were quizzing very, very well. We've got the mayor and we've got Mark up here. So Hugh, Mark, and Kerry, ladies and gentlemen, we've hit some issues. Obviously, the balloon really dominated the topic. But I'm hoping let's percolate a nice conversation here for the next 15 to 20 minutes and then give you your weekend. So questions from the floor for our 3 panelists on Lake Erie, what we need to do about it. So I hate to do this, but I'm going to pick on. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, what's your first name?
Tammy?
Tammy. What's your question and who do you want to have answer?
Listen, let's start with me. Mr. Mayor, I have a good question for you. Okay, when
you run for office, you run the risk of your constituents asking probing questions. Come to the ground.
with one of them, it's another one altogether. What is, with concerning the cleaning of the lake, the probability of bringing industry or manufacturing back, and if we were able to, maybe not on the same scale that was here in the 60s, but even a smaller manufacturing company, and do you think the restrictions that would be placed on them would deter industry from returning to our lake or our town?
The restrictions probably would, but you gotta understand those restrictions aren't
Let's see if we can expand that one real quick. For those of you who didn't hear it, the question was, if we're cleaning up the lake, is that an impediment to industry and manufacturing in particular coming back to the area? From the point of view of history, since you did such a great job of filling us in on the 60s and 70s, and since you're touching a lot of bodies of water, would you guys expand on that? From the record books, and I'm going hard, what happened industry-wise as the lake was improving over the last 20 to 30 years? And for the projects you've seen, have you seen the economic rebound around it? So is this really a zero-sum or loss game cleaning the lake?
Well, as far as industry goes, I mean, obviously manufacturing took a huge hit throughout the country. And most of the, I would have to say a lot of the industry located in this area had to do with automotive, Erie Army Depot, Erie Ordnance Depot, most of that was military. Can it come back? I don't see why some of it can't come back. I don't really see the same problems with some of it coming back. I think it's going to have to take a lot of effort. A lot of times I just think we'll be able to bring some of this back. But, you know, and if we want to bring families to the area, we're going to have jobs for them. You know, we can't just expect families to come here. I don't know how many of you have ever commuted any kind of distance for work. I used to work in Toledo, and you know, winter driving back and forth on Route 2 is not fun. And you know, I did that for 3 years, and believe me, I don't know what to do yet. So, and if you don't have something here for families, it's going to be a tough stuff. That's what
Kerry, jump in.
Yeah, we've been successful bringing businesses into smaller towns, but you got to rethink what you think of a business. For example, in the last 2 years, we brought in 6 breweries to the city of Hamilton. All right, breweries give out a lot of wastewater. Okay, that's not pleasant stuff. The wort gets sold to the farmers and that, but you know what's left is not pleasant, and it does have to be treated. But we've worked out with our sewer district, you know, that we keep looking at treating each individual industry, when reality is it has to be treated at the facility. So we worked out with them that they would pay collectively smaller amounts so that it was treated at the end of the line at the facility. And it actually made it, for whatever reason, in the city of Hamilton, made it very enticing to those 6 breweries. Now, in the same token, we did not get a car manufacturer that did stamping operation, even though we were, and I believe they didn't come to Hamilton because we're so far away from the Greensburg Honda plant in Greensburg, Indiana. And it was just tough. You got to get to the city, and you know, if you go through the city of Hamilton, it's an old blue-collar city. There's been a lot of business left. You know, housing went down, things went down. It's revitalizing, but it's done things like that. I agree it takes effort, but I also think you need to. I think we as manufacturers need to rethink manufacturing. You know, if we think of creation of jobs instead of manufacturing, I think that gives us a different area of that. So, for example, you know, I know insurance people that are looking for places all over the world. You know, why an insurance company wants to sit in the same city as their competition, I have no clue. Bill and I were talking about this one day. You know, I don't know why they're doing it. They're flocking to San Antonio right now, and now USA. Who knows why, right? That could be something. And again, it's hard to do. You've got to know somebody in the business when they're ready to open it up, or you've got to have an incubator in your area for small businesses to be able to start and to help the small business start. But I agree, it's not easy.
Okay, great question. Jan, first thing?
I just want to say about the restrictions, question about if, you know, restrictions on new corporations or companies coming in. You got, actually, some of those restrictions can create a new industry to solve the problem of the initial problem. Example, my first husband, he worked for Republic, then LTV Steel. When the EPA Act went through, they had to get rid of the acid rain, so they built what was called the sulfaban plant, which took the sulfur out of the emissions before it went into the air to make the sulfuric acid. So putting up the sulfaban plant then again created jobs for that industry that had to clean up the air, the gases
comes to energy policy, either the ethanol subsidies or the windmills, which I think, according to what Mr. Kerry brought us, those turbines should be upside down and aerating instead of being a hazard for voters. It's just, your thoughts,
correct.
please.
You're correct. There actually are windmills that are horizontal windmills. They produce a lot more power and a lot less cost. The interesting thing about a windmill is it actually almost takes more energy to run it than it produces. So that's why you have to have them in a field. That's why think about something with a windmill. You've got a stem, you've got this windmill going this way, so you've got all these gears that are turning that, it's turning something inside that's creating the energy. So just that linkage between the two is very handy.
And I think those components are actually made in China. We don't even make them here.
No, we don't. GE makes everything in China.
There's a bit of common sense that goes with that. There was a company in Canada that they were called inversion mills, and they set on two opposite pole magnets, and they set in oil, and they would spin this way. The company was so efficient that one of the Chinese companies that made the mills that go this way bought them out and hid the technology. You know why they did that? Because they were more efficient. They would put the energy companies out of business because it costs less per kilowatt hour to create the mills that go this way than this way.
But trying to drive this back towards the Patty question and how it affects the lake, which is obviously of paramount interest to the folks in Port Clinton. I think what you were trying to do was very politely ask about the renewable fuel standards and whether or not the government should be driving us to grow corn, to make ethanol, to burn in engines, instead of letting the farmers decide what crops they want to grow themselves and rotating them and potentially putting a whole lot less fertilizer on them because they're doing the classic crop rotation instead of just corn all the time. You were being politically correct, which is not like it.
Well, I didn't want to be corny.
I think she's being funny saying that you actually should be in the water.
Oh, yeah.
But it's funny because you mentioned when you talked about the corn and we had a customer that is I'm not beating up on farmers, it's just some of the policies. He raises a lot of corn and he's got a corn belt burner. But he uses LP to drive his corn so he can burn it.
Makes sense, right?
No, yeah, it's just something that's just really kind of bizarre, especially with the problem we have last week with the propane insurance. Here's a guy using propane, the guy's trying to, something just doesn't seem right.
Mr. Mayor, you want to jump in on this one? No. Okay, so let me see if I can close the one on the renewable fuel standards. Just as a general philosophy, I'm for market-based solutions instead of the government trying to take tax dollars out of people's pockets to make something else happen. Farmers deserve to be prosperous, they deserve to sell their crops, they deserve to make a lot of money, they deserve to have warm homes in the winter, cool ones in the summer so they get to college. There's 7 billion people on the planet, more than 1 billion of which don't have enough water to drink or food to eat. I think the market for food globally is pretty substantial. And if we grow food instead of fuel, there's a market for it. So a market-based solution to grow food instead of fuel, and let's get the right deal so that we can sell worldwide anywhere for Ohio farmers, instead of forcing them to do one crop, not rotate on the soil, and not have to over-fertilize, is probably a good idea. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to ask you a question since you're the energy guy.
You're an answer
So, you always hear about how individuals can put in solar or a windmill, and you don't use, you be able to sell that extra power back to the utility. Any kind of comment on that?
The best example for that exists in the state of Hawaii. They have a lot of sunshine in the state, unlike you. I think solar panel penetration in Hawaii is somewhere between about 22 and 24% of the total grid. So they get a tremendous amount of solar power in Hawaii because they've got so much sun. And then what happens is a cloud bank rolls in and 22% of the grid drops off right now. And it browns out every house, every hospital, you name it. The intermittency from solar at any kind of large scale makes running a modern manufacturing, modern electronics-driven economy almost impossible. Anybody want to turn your refrigerator at home off 16 hours a day? And only run it for 8 hours? How about we run your furnace between, your furnace at home? You can run it from noon till 5 o'clock at night during the winter, but 5 till noon the rest of the time your furnace is on. A modern economy depends on 24/7, 365 base load power. When the electrons drop off, we brown out, we black out, and our economy, healthcare systems, educational, everything comes to a grinding halt. So, you want to put a solar panel up there and try to knock electrons off of your bill? I'm all for it. Build whatever you want, put it on your piece of property. But let's not delude ourselves that particularly in Ohio, we get maybe 4 hours of peak sunshine a day, that will drive a vibrant, modern economy in Ohio. It just won't work. Question from the man. Please be for these guys, because I'm supposed to moderate, not dominate the room.
Well, this is for you because of what you just said.
I apologize, guys.
No, I mean, I'm just a rebuttal to what you just said. Finland is now 50% green power. How do they do that then?
Define what green means.
That means solar and wind.
Storage
Solar and wind power compromises 50% of Finland's power source
Okay.
as we speak, as of this week.
Finland has a coastline that resembles California. If you have coastline that sits on a body of salt water, the wind will blow 20 to 24 hours a day. You can put up a windmill on the ocean, and it will blow solar out of the water. It really will.
Is that why we're putting windmills up in Cleveland in the water?
I live 2.5 miles from the windmill at the Lake Erie Science Center, and it does this all day long. I'm 8 miles away from the windmills at Lincoln Electric, and you watch them and they do this all day. You can sit there and with an hourglass, you can count the RPMs on it. We don't have the wind density in Cleveland for it to be an effective 24/7, 365 baseload power sources. There are places in the world. Put a windmill on a mountain in Maine at 12,000 feet where it blows at 150 miles an hour, 365 days out of the year. That windmill's making a lot of juice. It really does. You gotta think about these tools from where you're going to put them. And then we gotta work on the definition of green. Norway is phenomenal on green power. They have the world's largest hydropower installation because the water runs down those mountains off the fjords. There's a hydroelectric dam. Hydroelectric generators all over that country without the need of dams. We don't have mountains with snow on them that's melting 12 months out of the year. But that's a green power source. By the way, this town is phenomenally green. Davis Bessie's just down the road. It's a 1 gigawatt nuke plant. It makes no CO2, has 0 emissions. By the way, it's almost paid for, and it's a nice little profit generator for First Energy.
I got a question for Mayor Wheeler. And I understand that you're a new mayor, but manufacturing has bailed from Port Clinton. The algal blooms, could they cause your biggest industry now, tourism, to bail from Port Clinton? How critical is that algal bloom to tourism in this town?
Very critical.
What is Port Clinton going to be doing to try and mitigate the algal bloom?
Well, I sit on water council. I'm sure some of our council people sit on that. Are they part of the water council? I mean, we are actively involved with the state and federal, looking for solutions.
Inviting Kelly here to speak to us.
But I mean, if you're looking for tourism and Shores and Islands is luring people to Port Clinton because of all the things we have, but in August, September, actually July, August, September, we bring people up to Port Clinton and to the islands and to all these wonderful places here, and the first thing they see is the green slime. Are they going to come back?
Unless we clean it up.
And I mean, is this the beginning of trying to clean it up sessions like this?
Yes. The more people you get involved, the better it gets.
Is it?
But people have to get involved.
One of the other questions is, and this is phosphorus pollution on Lake Erie. If you go outside of Port Clinton to the west, to Erie Township, Camp Perry, the estimate is that 30% of the septic systems in that area have failed, and they're dumping fecal material into Lake Erie, which kind of, because of the current going west to east, swims right past Port Clinton Beach.
As far as our county, we are involved in that. There are sewer separations going on in the city. There are sewer systems that will be coming connected to the city system from Erie Township, Camp Perry, and,
Well, we heard from Bayview from 1969 to this very day, they were going to tie into Sandusky's system, and they have yet to do it.
Mark, did you want to jump in on the sewer issue?
Well, as far as South Lakeshore Drive, when I was on city council, it was one of the things that I tried to, the city didn't want to take the lead in bringing the people in Erie Township onto the sewer lines. But it's actually going to Lakeshore Drive. It's my understanding that the county commissioners are giving the plan together now that will, help to try and get Erie Township onto that sewer line and take care of it.
we have some of them now.
So it is, they are working towards it.
You know, I just wanted to say that I did ask First Energy if they would send a representative out to our forum here, but nothing in anyone's schedule came through for us. And Mark, to your, to what you asked Don Larson earlier about if you have a windmill or a solar panel and the excess energy generated, if there's some, you can sell it back to the grid. In my experience with, there's a Pro-Rod Auto put up like the first wind turbine in the area a while ago. They've since gone out of business, just so anyone knows. I saw the paperwork, and the agreement between the energy company and the owners of the windmill. And though we are charged as consumers at a variable rate for peak times and off times for energy use, the energy generated from that turbine, whatever isn't used to power that business that goes back to the grid, is bought back at a constant rate, whether it's peak or otherwise. So that's an aspect that's kind of misleading to the benefits of private enterprise engaging in these renewables, intermittent though they are, other weaknesses that they have. There's not a policy that complements the fact that consumers are charged a variable rate, yet the energy bought back is a constant rate. So that's something to think about if a municipality went in on some kind of green project and expected a better return than they're actually going to get. They might not get what you think. That's a better way to say it.
And as, since I am an electrical contractor, I'm a little familiar with some of this. And normally, unless you can use the energy that you created through solar or wind, really, there isn't much opportunity to put it back in the grid, because the grid can take so much increase. So, utility companies, my understanding is basically they plan on generating so much electricity to meet the needs. And if your windmills, you aren't using that power. That's why you see so many of them that aren't even turning, because they can't use anything. They can't use that extra power that's being generated and just shut back into the grid. It just doesn't work. Windmills and solar, they're fine if you've got the boost form. That's, to me, is the biggest thing. Is that an individual, a company, or whoever is putting one up, you better just pretty much plan on using it yourself. I guess that's my thing. Rather than selling it back into the grid. So many times I think it's presented that way, that you're going to be able to get a return on your investment by selling the power. So, it's really not.
Question on the far side of the room, yes, sir.
I'm not trying to put my brain in here before my mouth, but
You make a terrible politician, but continue.
the question is that for the most part, we're gonna have to depend on tourism, which does depend on a clean Lake Erie. Okay, and I just don't think we'll get companies in the area. The only way you're gonna do it is give them tax abatements, because you got no labor force. And I don't mean Port Clinton, I mean all the way from the far west side of Cleveland to Toledo, there's no workforce.
That's a much broader economic development issue.
Absolutely.
We're trying to tackle here today, but I don't want to override the panel unless particularly our two politicians on this side want to tackle it. I think Kerry will probably bail on the workforce education, but he's bailing big time. I don't know if you guys want to address it or if you want that sidebar later.
I'll address that as well.
Okay.
If we're going to depend on a tourist-based economy only, then we're going to continue to see a decline in the general population. We went down to, one of the things around here, everybody says, well, if we just extend the tourist season, we'll do a lot better. And, we went down to Orange Beach, Alabama, right on the Gulf Shores, right next to the Gulf Shores, Alabama. Went down there in October, 80-degree weather. Not a soul there. There are miles and miles and miles of beaches with nobody there. Because once school is back in session, the tourist season ends. I don't care what you really do, you're just not going to be able to extend the tourist season past school. It just isn't going to happen. If we rely strictly on tourist-based economy, it isn't going to provide the type of jobs that the people that live here all year round are really going to be able to live. So if there isn't any effort made towards bringing anything back, then what we're going to have is what we have right now. And you're going to see a declining population. You're going to see younger families are going to have to go where the jobs are. I mean, we may have a workforce issue right now, but it's going to be worse. That's
Well, what are you gonna do again, away from the lake? What are we gonna do to address the job environment?
I think that's a very worthy question, but outside the scope of what we intended to do. A very worthy question.
Monday night.
But it's after 1 o'clock. I see some jumping. Let's do the last question and let's give everybody the weekend.
Mr. Larson, you brought up the problem that the western states, California, that are undergoing droughts would love to get their hands on some of our Great Lake water.
They're delusional, but yes, they will.
Yeah, well, next time anybody from California brings that up, that they're under a drought, would you please mention the term desalinization plant? They have billions of water there in the Pacific Ocean. I believe California has more than 1,000 miles of coast, or if I'm not mistaken. And I believe there's a number of countries in the Middle East that's the only way they get their pure water is desalinization plant. So I think desalinization would solve their problem in California, and let's keep our own water here in the Great Lakes, or Ohio and the rest of them.
I would agree completely. Just to reinforce that, the first week of June last year, I was in Sacramento. I got to walk the Capitol building, but I was in one of the offices of the California Desal Association that week, and I met with their director, and we talked about the desalinization plan for California. And you remember my comment earlier about how Ohio environmentalists look like right-wingers compared to California environmentalists. I got most of that from him because they are prepared to do exactly what you said. But there's two regulatory authorities on the West Coast that are killing. It's the California Coastal Commission and it's the California Water Resources Board. And I'm screwing up the second one. The California Coastal Commission just put in place the most stringent regulations in the world on using ocean water for cooling. There are 9 power plants, not making water, making electricity, that by the way keeps things like Silicon Valley, Apple, Google, Amazon running, that are all going to have to shut down and turn over to air-cooled systems. Because the California Coastal Commission is worried they're going to make the Pacific Ocean too hot. More energy, I promise to do the math for somebody, but there's 65 million square miles of Pacific Ocean. I'm willing to bet that more energy falls on the Pacific every single day, then the entire United States uses it a year. So there's no way that we are going to thermally challenge the Pacific Ocean power. You know, a tiny little creek running a plant, okay, I get it. A small creek by one power plant, you can change the temperature of a small river with a power plant. You cannot change the temperature of the Pacific Ocean with every power plant in the country. But that's not how the California Coastal Commission thinks. And until the taps run dry out there, and you go there to take a shower, and nothing comes out, California's not going to wake up. They have the resources there and the capability to do it. So, and by the way, they're nuts if they think they're getting water from here, because you'd have to build a gigawatt plant like every 30 miles to run the pumping stations to pump water from here to the West Coast. It's insane. It's just positively moronic. Just nuts. With half of those facilities, you could desalinate all the water that all 32 million people on the West Coast need. So, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for being the last voice, but that one was kind of directed at me. I want to thank our guest, particularly the one who drove up from Cincinnati. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a lot of them identified, and let's keep working together and try to kill. Thank you.